So, Sophie Cunningham, it happened again. The WNBA have fined her again.
The WNBA just made what might be the most catastrophic public relations blunder in recent memory. And it all started when Sophie Cunningham decided to tell the truth. What happened next has sent shockwaves through the basketball world, created a fan uprising, and exposed the league's priorities in the most embarrassing way possible. By the time this story is over...
We were talking about, like, our first week, what people had to say. Well, the WNBA fined me.
No! You got fined for episode 1?
Dude, they fined me $1,500. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is just the beginning.
You'll understand why the WNBA is now scrambling to contain damage that they created entirely by themselves. Sophie Cunningham, the fiery guard for the Phoenix Mercury, thought she was just being honest when she hopped on social media back in July. Like millions of basketball fans watching WNBA games, she'd seen enough questionable calls and missed fouls to last a lifetime. So when she posted that TikTok video basically calling out
officiating, and what's pretty wild, and I made this comment because I shared, she has come out, she's been fined again, by the way, by the WNBA, because she made comments criticizing when she told them and talked about getting fined for this on her podcast.
The league's referees as useless. She probably figured she was saying what everyone else was already thinking. Little did she know, she was about to become the
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Center of a controversy that would expose everything wrong with how the WNBA operates behind the scenes. The league's response was swift and predictable. They slapped Sophie with a $500 fine for having the audacity to point out what every fan with functioning eyeballs could see during any given game. Most players would have quietly paid the fine and moved on, but Sophie Cunningham isn't most players. She runs her own podcast called Show Me Something, where she gives fans the kind of unfiltered access that leagues should be encouraging. So naturally, she talked about getting fined.
Oh, way. I'm glad that you saved that for this and didn't text me, because that's unreal. I mean, it's like, it's cool for the pod, but that's kind of a bummer. Do they, when you get fined, do they put like verbatim, like quote here, like this is why you're being fined and this is why it's this much? Or is it like, hey, quit talking shit on us, Venmo us like $1,500?
No. What happens is they tag
her TikTok criticism. Here's where this story goes from annoying to absolutely insane. The WNBA, apparently operating under some kind of bureaucratic fever dream, decided that Sophie talking about her fine was itself worthy of another fine. They hit her with $1,500 this time, bringing her total punishment to $2,000. Think about that for a second. The league fined a player for criticizing refs, then fined her again for mentioning that she got...
They email our GM, and she pulls me aside and she goes, come here, Soph, I have to talk to you. And this was in like front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now? And she just smiled and she goes, hey, they're going to fine you again. They're like, I was like, I even told them, I even credited them that their job was hard. I did say that. And I said that I would not be good at it. I did say that. Like, look at the whole picture. What are we doing? But yeah, so I got fined for that. So
Fined for criticizing refs. It's like something out of a dystopian novel, except instead of being a profound commentary on authoritarian overreach, it's just the WNBA being the WNBA. The absurdity reaches new heights when you consider that Sophie wasn't even being particularly harsh in her criticism. She actually went out of her way to acknowledge that officiating is a difficult job and that some referees do good work. But apparently, even the most diplomatic criticism wrapped in understanding and nuance is too much for the league's delicate sensibilities. The message being sent is
referees that were actually doing their jobs, getting calls correct, and by the way, keeping some kind of law and order in the league. You wouldn't have a player that's having to go on their podcast talking about the officiating blows.
It's crystal clear. Any criticism of league operations is forbidden, no matter how constructive or measured it might be. What makes this situation even more maddening is the timing. While the WNBA is busy playing fine police with Sophie Cunningham, major media outlets are raising serious questions about the league's handling of much bigger issues. The Wall Street Journal published an explosive opinion piece suggesting that federal agencies should investigate potential civil rights violations against Caitlin Clark. Fox News ran lengthy segments discussing whether the government needs to step in to address what looks like a systematically hostile work environment. When mainstream business publications and major news networks are talking about your league like it's a discrimination lawsuit waiting to happen, maybe you should be focused on bigger problems than podcast comments. The contrast in how the league handles different types of problems is absolutely stunning and reveals everything you need to know about their warped priorities. For nearly 2 years, fans have watched players take cheap shots at Caitlin Clark with minimal consequences. Marina Mabrey can blindside Clark with a dangerous hit that could have caused serious injury. DJ Carrington can nearly take her eye out with reckless play. These incidents happen on national television, create genuine safety concerns, and threaten the league's biggest star. Yet somehow those players keep playing without meaningful punishment. But Sophie Cunningham says the refs aren't doing their jobs well, and suddenly the league becomes very concerned about maintaining proper standards and holding people accountable. It's like watching someone ignore a house fire while getting upset that someone didn't use a coaster on their coffee table. The priorities are so backwards, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic and damaging to the sport's credibility. The fan response has been immediate, organic, and absolutely brutal for the league's reputation. Within hours of news breaking about Sophie's second fine, GoFundMe campaigns started popping up offering to pay her penalties. A petition demanding changes to WNBA officiating began gaining signatures at a rapid pace, with people adding their names every few minutes. Social media exploded with criticism of the league's decision, and the comments weren't just from casual complainers. These were engaged fans expressing genuine frustration with leadership that seems completely disconnected from reality. One fan observation that went viral perfectly captured the hypocrisy. The WNBA fined Sophie for her referee podcast comments, but lets players beat the hell out of Caitlin Clark for 2 seasons with no fines. That kind of observation cuts right to the heart of what's wrong with this league's approach to discipline and accountability. The petition signatures are particularly telling because they show this isn't just about supporting Sophie's right to criticize. Fans are actively demanding that the league address the underlying officiating problems she highlighted. This is organic frustration finally finding an outlet, not some organized campaign by activists with an agenda. Now, to be fair, most professional sports leagues do fine players for publicly criticizing officials. It's a standard practice across the NBA, NFL, and other major sports. But here's the crucial difference. Most professional leagues also have competent officiating that doesn't require constant criticism from players and fans. When your referees are so consistently bad that players feel compelled to speak out regularly, maybe the problem isn't the players talking about it. The NFL catches heat for questionable calls sometimes, but compared to the WNBA, NFL officials look like Rhodes Scholars with perfect vision and supernatural judgment. When the NFL's officiating looks 1,000% better than yours, you might want to focus on fixing the actual problem instead of silencing the people pointing it out. What makes Sophie's situation even more ridiculous is that her criticism wasn't some profanity-filled rant or personal attack on individual referees. She basically made the objectively verifiable statement that the refs aren't good at their jobs. Anyone who's watched more than 5 minutes of WNBA basketball can confirm this assessment. The league's response shows they're more concerned about controlling the narrative than addressing legitimate concerns that could actually improve the product on the court. Instead of using player feedback as an opportunity to evaluate and improve officiating standards, they're trying to shut down any discussion of the problems. That's not leadership. That's damage control by people who don't understand how damage control actually works in the modern media landscape. The irony is delicious and predictable. By fining Sophie, the WNBA guaranteed that her criticism would get infinitely more attention than it would have gotten otherwise. Her podcast probably got more downloads from people wanting to hear what got her fined than it would have received through normal promotion. The fine became a much bigger story than whatever she originally said to earn it. This is basic public relations 101. When you try to silence criticism, you almost always end up amplifying it. The Streisand effect is a real phenomenon, and the WNBA just walked directly into it with their eyes wide open. Sophie's honesty and willingness to speak candidly about problems is exactly what the league needs more of, not less. When players are willing to give honest feedback about issues they see, that creates genuine opportunities for improvement and growth. When you punish honesty and authentic communication, you create a culture where problems get swept under the rug until they become impossible to ignore or fix. The WNBA has been struggling with credibility issues for years, and this kind of heavy-handed response to legitimate criticism just makes those problems exponentially worse. Fans want to see a league that takes accountability seriously and addresses obvious flaws in a transparent way. They don't want to see players getting financially punished for pointing out things that everyone can already see with their own eyes. This whole mess highlights a fundamental philosophical problem with how the WNBA views its relationship with players. Instead of seeing them as partners in building a better league and creating compelling content that fans actually want to consume, they seem to treat players like employees who need to be managed and controlled. That approach doesn't build the kind of authentic relationships that make leagues successful and culturally relevant. The best sports leagues in history have always featured players who speak their minds, create storylines, and generate the kind of genuine drama that keeps fans engaged. Charles Barkley made an entire career out of saying controversial things, and the NBA was infinitely better for having that kind of authentic personality. But the WNBA seems to want players who are seen but not heard, which is a guaranteed recipe for bland, forgettable entertainment that nobody talks about. Sophie Cunningham is actually one of the more interesting personalities in the entire WNBA, and her podcast is creating exactly the kind of buzz and authentic engagement that the league should be encouraging. Instead of supporting content creation that gives fans behind-the-scenes access to player perspectives, they're actively discouraging it by hitting her with financial penalties every time she says something remotely critical or honest. The fan response proves how disconnected the league office has become from its actual audience. People aren't defending the WNBA's decision to fine Sophie. They're offering to pay her penalties and signing petitions demanding systematic changes. When your punishment creates more criticism and negative attention than the original offense, you've handled the situation catastrophically poorly. The league's approach also reveals they fundamentally misunderstand how modern media works. In an era where athletes have direct access to fans through social media, podcasts, and personal content creation, trying to control narratives through fines and penalties isn't just ineffective, it's completely counterproductive. Sophie's podcast represents exactly the kind of authentic, unfiltered content that creates genuine fan engagement and builds deeper connections to the sport. What makes this entire controversy even more embarrassing is the contrast with how the league handles actual on-court problems. Players can deliver dangerous, potentially career-threatening hits to the league's biggest star with minimal consequences, but talking about poor officiating on a podcast results in immediate financial penalties. The priorities are completely backwards, and it perfectly illustrates why the WNBA continues to struggle with mainstream acceptance and credibility. This situation is ultimately a symptom of a much bigger leadership problem within the WNBA. They're more concerned with image management than actually managing the issues that damage their image in the first place. Better officiating standards would eliminate the need for players to criticize referees publicly. When the product on the court is consistently good, players don't feel compelled to complain about it. When it's consistently problematic, no amount of fines will stop people from talking about those problems. Until the league's fundamental approach changes, fans can expect more situations exactly like this one. The WNBA just proved beyond any doubt that they're more worried about controlling criticism than fixing the problems that generate that criticism in the first place. Sophie Cunningham told an uncomfortable truth about their officiating, and now they're dealing with exponentially more negative publicity than they started with. This entire mess could have been avoided with competent leadership that understands basic public relations and prioritizes actual improvement over damage control. Instead, they chose the path that created maximum controversy and minimum solutions, perfectly encapsulating everything that frustrates fans about how this league operates.